Danny Carter stood in the maintenance bay of the Valiant Dawn and wiped grease from his hands with an old rag that had seen better days. The massive starship hummed around him with the sound of 1,000 systems working in harmony while alien crew members passed by without even glancing in his direction. I've been aboard this ship for 18 months now and still felt like a ghost haunting the corridors. The coalition was supposed to be an alliance of equals, but Danny knew the truth ran much deeper and darker than the official propaganda suggested. 12 species made up this grand alliance, and humans were the newest members, barely 5 years into their membership, and still treated like the children at the adult table. Captain Zrel was a Krent, and he commanded the Valiant Dawn with an iron fist that matched his species' reputation for military prowess. The Krent stood nearly 8 feet tall, with natural armor plating that made them look like walking tanks. Their strength was legendary, and their pride even more so. Danny had tried many times to offer suggestions during crew briefings, but Zrel never even acknowledged his presence. The chief engineer court belonged to the Vexel species and possessed 4 arms that moved with practiced efficiency. As he worked on the ship's complex systems court, assigned Danny the worst jobs imaginable: cleaning waste recyclers, crawling through cramped access tunnels, replacing burned-out components in areas most crew members refused to enter. Whenever Danny completed a task ahead of schedule or found a creative solution to a problem, Court simply grunted and moved on to the next assignment. The Solari crew members were telepaths who could communicate silently with each other, and they often excluded Danny from important conversations simply because he could not join their mental network. He learned to accept the isolation as part of his daily routine. Mission to Kithara 9 started like any other survey operation, with the Valiant Dawn entering orbit around a planet that scans suggested was uninhabited and rich in mineral resources. Captain Zrel assembled an away team of 15 crew members, and Danny was surprised when his name appeared on the roster. Carter, you will handle equipment transport, Zrel announced without looking at him directly. Danny nodded and gathered the necessary gear while the rest of the team prepared their weapons and scanning devices. The shuttle ride down to the surface was tense and quiet, with the alien crew members talking among themselves in their various languages, while Danny sat alone in the back. HFY 9 looked beautiful from above, with purple forests and crystal blue rivers cutting through valleys of red stone. The team landed in a clearing near what appeared to be ancient ruins, and everyone spread out to begin their surveys. Danny hauled equipment from one location to another and set up scanning stations while the scientists took readings and the soldiers maintained a defensive perimeter. Everything seemed routine until the screaming started. The Ravagers came from nowhere, massive, predatory creatures that moved in coordinated packs with intelligence that went far beyond simple animal cunning. They had been watching and waiting, and they struck with devastating precision. Danny dropped the scanner he was carrying and grabbed his sidearm as chaos erupted around him. The team fought back with energy weapons that lit up the purple forest, but the Ravagers kept coming in waves that seemed endless. Fall back to the shuttle, Zrel's voice boomed over the communication channel. Danny found himself at the rear of the retreating group, and he provided covering fire while his crewmates ran for safety. The shuttle engines roared to life as crew members scrambled aboard through the loading ramp. Danny ran harder than he had ever run in his life, with Ravagers closing in from 3 directions and his lungs burning from the exertion. Wait for Carter, someone shouted, but Danny could not identify the voice. He was 50 meters from the shuttle when he saw the loading ramp beginning to close. I'm almost there, Danny called into his communicator while pushing his legs to move faster. Shuttle began to lift off, and Danny's heart dropped into his stomach. Captain, Carter is still out here, a crew member protested over the open channels. Zrel's response came cold and clear. The shuttle is overloaded, and we cannot risk the entire team for one weak link. The human was expendable. Danny skidded to a stop and watched the shuttle rise into the sky while Ravagers circled closer with their glowing eyes fixed on him. He fired his weapon at the nearest creature, and it fell, but 3 more took its place. The shuttle disappeared into the clouds, and Danny was alone. He ran for the ruins and found a narrow cave entrance that the Ravagers seemed hesitant to approach. His hand shook as he checked his remaining ammunition. 23 shots left and no way off this planet. The sun was setting and the temperature was dropping fast. Danny could hear the Ravagers outside making clicking sounds that might have been communication between pack members. He had basic survival training from his time in the Earth military before joining the Coalition, but nothing had prepared him for being abandoned on an alien world. His communicator crackled with static, and he heard fragments of transmission from the Valiant Dawn. Difficult decision made under fire. Tragic loss. Heroic sacrifice. They were already writing the report that would erase him from existence. Danny Carter sat in the cave entrance with his weapon ready and watched the alien sky turn dark. The Ravagers prowled outside, and their eyes reflected what little light remained, like dozens of small moons floating in the darkness. He had 2 choices: give up and die here alone, or survive long enough to make sure everyone knew what happened. The clicking sounds grew louder as more Ravagers gathered, and Danny checked his ammunition one more time. 23 shots and a whole planet full of things that wanted to kill him. He thought about Earth and wondered if anyone that would ever learn the truth about how the Coalition treated their people. His father had been so proud when Danny was accepted into the Coalition service program. The memory made his jaw clench with determination. Danny stood up and moved deeper into the cave system while keeping his eyes on the entrance. He would not die here, not tonight, and not without a fight. The Ravagers could have this entrance, but he would find another way. His hand touched the cave wall and felt strange markings carved into the stone. Someone or something had lived here before. Danny activated his wrist light and followed the markings deeper into the darkness, while the sounds of the Ravagers slowly faded behind him. He was alone on Kethra 9, but he was still breathing. That meant he still had a chance. The first week on Kethra 9 tested every survival skill Danny had ever learned and forced him to discover abilities he never knew existed within himself. The cave system became his home and his fortress, while the Ravagers continued their patient hunt outside. Danny spent his days exploring the deeper tunnels and mapping the underground network that seemed to stretch for miles beneath the surface. He found water in an underground stream that tasted strange but did not make him sick after. Careful testing food was harder, but Danny discovered mushroom-like growths on the cave walls that provided basic nutrition, even though they tasted like wet cardboard mixed with dirt. His ammunition ran out after 11 days, and Danny was forced to craft weapons from materials he found in the caves. Sharp stones became knife blades when he wrapped them in strips torn from his uniform bones. From creatures that had died in the caves became spear shafts when he learned to shape them with patience. Grinding against harder rocks, the bow was his proudest achievement. Constructed from flexible wood he found near the underground stream and strung with fibers he painstakingly extracted from vine-like plants. Danny practiced with his new weapons every day, and his accuracy improved through necessity rather than choice. The Ravagers never stopped hunting, but Danny began to notice patterns in their behavior that the Coalition survey team had completely missed. They hunted primarily by scent and heat signature, which explained why they avoided certain areas of the cave system where mineral deposits created natural thermal interference. Creatures moved in packs of 5 to 7 individuals, and they coordinated their attacks with clicking sounds that served as a sophisticated communication system. Most importantly, Danny realized that Ravagers were apex predators on this planet, but they had never encountered a persistence hunter before. Humans evolved on Earth as endurance predators who could track prey for days until the target collapsed from exhaustion. The Ravagers were built for speed and power, but not for extended pursuits. Danny used this knowledge to his advantage. His first successful hunt came in the third week when he tracked the lone Ravager that had separated from its pack. The creature was faster and stronger, but Danny followed it for 12 hours, across rough terrain until it finally stopped to rest. His spear throw was not perfect, but it was good enough, and the Ravager fell. Danny learned to use every part of the animal. Its hide became additional clothing. Its bones became better tools. Its meat sustained him for days. More importantly, he learned each hunt taught him something new about Ravager behavior, about the planet's ecosystem, about his own capabilities when pushed beyond normal limits. By the second month, Danny was no longer prey. He had become a predator. The Coalition had written him off as weak because humans lacked natural armor like the Krenth or multiple arms like the Vessel, but human evolution had crafted something more valuable than physical advantages: adaptability. Danny found the abandoned Coalition equipment during a hunt that took him 3 miles from his cave. The team had dropped several supply packs during their panicked retreat, and one contained a damaged long-range transmitter. He carried it back to his cave and spent 2 weeks repairing it with materials scavenged from other equipment. When the transmitter finally crackled to life, Danny did not call for help. Instead, he listened. Coalition frequencies were busy with routine traffic, and Danny monitored them for hours every day while learning the patterns of communication. He heard reports about mineral surveys and trade negotiations and military exercises. What he did not hear was any mention of a rescue operation for Danny Carter. 3 months after being abandoned, Danny found the official report filed by Captain's Relth document described how Technician Carter had heroically sacrificed himself to allow the away team to escape. Zrel received a commendation for making difficult decisions under fire. The crew of the Valiant Dawn were praised for their bravery in the face of unexpected danger. Danny Carter was officially listed as killed in action with full honors. He sat in his cave and listened to the transmission while something cold and hard settled in his chest. They had not just abandoned him, they had erased him. The anger that filled Danny was different from the rage he felt during those first desperate days. This was focused and calculating. Began monitoring specific channels and learning about Coalition operations in the sector. Transmitter allowed him to access basic databases, and Danny discovered something interesting. Several crew members from the Valiant Dawn had connections to questionable operations throughout the region. Court. The chief engineer was linked to unauthorized mining operations that destroyed ecosystems for profit. 2 of the Solari officers were involved in smuggling rare artifacts from protected worlds. Even Captain Zrel had connections to weapons dealers who supplied both Coalition forces and their enemies. Danny realized that his abandonment had not been simply about being expendable. It had been convenient for people who wanted to hide their activities from someone who might notice irregularities. Human technician who paid attention to details and asked uncomfortable questions was a liability. The seasons changed on Kethra 9, and Danny changed with them. His body grew lean and hard from constant activity, and his senses sharpened through necessity. Learned to move through the forest without making sound and to predict Ravager movements before they happened. The creatures no longer hunted him with the same enthusiasm. They had learned that the strange two-legged hunter was dangerous and not worth the risks. Some packs avoided areas where Danny had established territory, even developed a strange understanding with one particular Ravager pack. They did not attack him, and he did not hunt them. A mutual respect between predators who recognized capable opponents. Danny used his improved skills to explore more of the planet, and he made a discovery that changed everything. Ruins near the original landing site were not random structures. They were part of a vast underground complex that stretched beneath most of the continent. Inside, he found technology that was old beyond measurement but still functional. The markings he had seen in his cave were everywhere here, and Danny spent weeks studying them. He could not read the alien language, but the patterns suggested warnings in historical records using the Coalition transmitter and comparing frequencies. Danny determined that this civilization had fallen approximately 10,000 years ago. The cause was not natural disaster or external invasion. The historical patterns suggested internal collapse, a society that had destroyed itself through arrogance, and the systematic devaluation of certain members. Danny found images carved into walls showing different species, working together until the stronger ones decided the weaker ones were expendable. The parallels to his own situation were impossible to ignore. He gathered data and took recordings of everything he found. By the 9th month, Danny had become something the Coalition had never imagined possible. He was a survivor who understood alien psychology better than the aliens understood themselves. He had evidence of corruption that reached high into Coalition command. He had learned to master an entire planet that was supposed to kill him. Most importantly, he had a plan. The hunter was ready to begin the greatest hunt of his life, not for survival but for justice. Danny spent 2 more months preparing before he made his first move against the Coalition that had abandoned him. His target was not the Valiant Dawn itself, but a mining operation on Cathara 7, the neighboring planet in the same system. The facility was run by Calix, a Vexil administrator who worked closely with Chief Engineer Court. Danny had monitored their communications for weeks and knew that the mining operation was stripping resources without proper environmental permits. They were destroying native ecosystems for profit while filing false reports with Coalition oversight committees. Getting off Cathara 9 required Danny to repair one of the old shuttles from the ruins. Ancient technology was different from Coalition systems, but Danny had become an expert at making broken things work. It took him 3 weeks to get the shuttle flight ready, and another week to test it in short hops across the planet. The journey to Cathara 7 was tense because Danny knew his stolen shuttle would not stand up to serious scrutiny from Coalition sensors. He approached from an unexpected angle and used the system's asteroid belt to mask his approach. The mining facility sat on the surface like a scar across the planet's green landscape. Danny landed 5 kilometers away and approached on foot under cover of darkness. His months on Cathara 9 had taught him patience and the value of careful observation. Spent 2 days watching the facility and learning the patterns of security patrols and shift changes. The guards were primarily Krenth soldiers who relied on their strength and technology rather than tactical thinking. Danny found it almost insulting how predictable they were. His infiltration happened during the night shift when only minimal security remained active. He moved through shadows with skills learned from avoiding Ravagers and disabled security systems with knowledge gained from 18 months. Maintaining Coalition technology. No alarm sounded as Danny accessed the central computer system. He downloaded records of illegal mining operations, falsified reports, and financial transactions that proved Court was profiting from environmental destruction. Before leaving, Danny uploaded a simple message to the facility's main display. The expendable human remembers. He was back in his shuttle and off the planet before anyone discovered the breach. The incident sent ripples through Coalition operations in the sector. Admiral Vrix, a Solari who commanded Coalition forces in this region, demanded explanations for how someone penetrated a secure facility. Calix insisted it must have been an inside job, because no outsider could have accessed the system so easily. Captain Jarrell was questioned about Danny Carter's death because the message referenced a human. He stuck to his story and insisted that Danny had died on Cathara 9 months ago. 2 weeks later, Danny hit another facility, this one connected to the Solari officers from the Valiant Dawn who were smuggling artifacts. He left the same calling card and disappeared before security could respond. The third infiltration happened a week after that. This time, Danny targeted a weapons depot linked to Captain Zrel himself. He did not steal weapons or sabotage systems. He simply downloaded records proving that Zrel was selling coalition military equipment to unauthorized buyers. Each operation exposed corruption while demonstrating capabilities that shocked the coalition's security. Analysts studied surveillance footage and tried to understand how one person could move with such precision. Danny appeared on cameras like a ghost, always 3 steps ahead of patrols and anticipating responses before they happened. Rumors spread across coalition space with the speed of light-speed communications. Some called him the Ghost of Kethra, while others named him the Hunter Junior officers. Whispered stories about the human who was left to die, but came back as something far more dangerous. The coalition deployed specialist teams to track Danny down. The first team consisted of Vexil trackers who used advanced sensors to predict his next target. Danny anticipated their methods and led them on a pursuit through an asteroid field where their ship was damaged by micrometeor impacts. They returned empty-handed and humiliated. The second team tried a more direct approach with Krenth soldiers equipped with heavy weapons. Danny avoided direct confrontation and instead hacked their communication systems, feeding them false information until they were chasing shadows across 3 different planets. Admiral Vrix watched these failures with growing frustration. She called a meeting with senior officers and demanded better results. "How is one human defeating our best specialists?" she asked, while her telepathic abilities projected disappointment to everyone present. "He is not acting like a human," one Krenth officer suggested. "He uses tactics we do not understand and moves with patience that exceeds normal capabilities." Lisa Brennan was a human diplomat working at Coalition headquarters, and she followed the reports about Danny with increasing concern. She began her own investigation into the official records surrounding his death. What Lisa discovered made her blood run cold. The report filed by Captain Zrel contained inconsistencies, and multiple crew members had been silenced through transfers or promotions. She found testimony from a junior officer who witnessed the abandonment but was threatened with court-martial if he spoke publicly. The coalition had not just allowed Danny to be abandoned. They had actively covered up the truth. Lisa tried to bring her findings to Admiral Vrix, but was told that reopening old investigations would damage coalition morale. She was advised to focus on her diplomatic duties and forget about one dead technician instead. Lisa began compiling evidence for a formal complaint to the Coalition Council. Meanwhile, Danny continued his campaign with surgical precision. Each target revealed more corruption, and each escape demonstrated superior tactical thinking. He was not killing anyone or destroying property beyond what was necessary to access systems. His goal was exposure rather than revenge. The Coalition Council finally authorized deployment of their most elite unit. Talon squad was led by Drexen, a Krenth warrior whose reputation for success was legendary. The squad consisted of 12 specialists from different species, each trained in advanced combat and tracking techniques. They were the best the Coalition had to offer. Drexen studied every piece of footage showing Danny and analyzed each infiltration, looking for patterns. "This human thinks differently," Drexen told his team during their briefing. "He does not rely on strength or advanced technology. He relies on understanding his opponents better than they understand themselves. Then we will think differently too." His second-in-command replied. Drexen shook his massive head and looked at the star map showing Danny's known locations. "No. We will use his own tactics against him. We will make him think he has the advantage, and then spring our trap." The squad tracked Danny to the Kelthis system, where an abandoned mining station provided perfect cover. Drexen positioned his team around every exit and prepared to close the net. "The hunt ends today," he announced to his squad inside the station. Danny checked his equipment one final time and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as he had planned. The Coalition thought they were hunting him, but Danny had been hunting them all along. He had studied Drexen's tactics through hacked military databases and understood how the warrior thought. This confrontation would not be won through strength or technology. It would be won by proving that the coalition had forgotten the most fundamental rule of survival. Never underestimate an opponent who has nothing left to lose. Talon Squad entered the abandoned mining station with weapons ready and sensors. Sweeping every corridor for signs of their target, Drexen moved at the center of the formation while his team spread out in a pattern designed to cover all possible escape routes. The Krenth warrior had hunted dangerous prey across a dozen worlds, but something about this mission felt different. Thermal signatures detected in Sector 7. One of the Vexil specialists reported through the squad's communication network. Moving to intercept, Drexen replied while directing half his team toward the location. What they found was a heating element. Danny had rigged to create a false signature by the time they realized the deception. 3 team members had been separated from the main group. Danny moved through the station like water flowing around obstacles. Had spent a week preparing this location and knew every vent shaft, every junction, every shadow that could provide cover. The station's old systems responded to commands he had programmed into the main computer doors, sealed at precisely timed moments while lights flickered in patterns. Designed to disorient rather than illuminate, the first squad member went down. When a section of flooring gave way beneath his weight, Danny had weakened the support structure just enough that it would hold until someone heavy stood in exactly the right spot. The Krenth soldier fell 3 meters into a storage bay, and while he was not seriously injured, he was effectively removed from the fight. Maintain formation, Drexen ordered, but the command came too late too. More specialists had already moved to help their fallen comrade, and Danny sealed the access doors behind them. The squad was now split into 3 groups across different sections of the station. Danny used sound to his advantage. Next, he activated old mining equipment in random sections, and the noise made it impossible for the team to rely on audio sensors. They were forced to use visual confirmation, which slowed their response time significantly. A Solari telepath tried to locate Danny through mental scanning but found nothing. Danny had learned during his time aboard the Valiant Dawn that simple meditation techniques could shield human thoughts from casual telepathic probes. The Solari pushed harder, and Danny allowed false impressions to surface. Images of different locations, contradictory movement patterns, emotional states that suggested panic. The telepath reported confused readings and admitted she could not get a clear lock on their target. Drexen growled in frustration and made a decision. All units converge on the central hub. We force him to come to us. But Danny had anticipated this response as the squad gathered in the main control room. He sealed every entrance and cut life support to that section. The team had approximately 30 minutes of air in their suits before they would need to evacuate. He is hurting us, Drexen realized while studying the station layout on his tactical display. He wants us exactly where we are. The Krenth warrior considered his options carefully. They could blast through the sealed doors, but that would waste time and ammunition. They could split up again, but that had already proven ineffective. Or they could wait and see what Danny wanted. Squad, prepare for contact. He's coming. Danny did come, but not in the way Drexen expected. Accessed the station's communication system, and his voice echoed through the control room. Captain Drexen, I know your reputation, and I respect your skills. As a warrior, Drexen activated his microphone and responded. Then surrender and we can end this without further conflict. I did not bring you here to surrender. Danny's voice remained calm and controlled. I brought you here to learn. Over the next 20 minutes, Danny explained his tactics in detail. He described how he studied each squad member through hacked coalition databases. He outlined how he used their own training against them because they had been taught to rely on technology and natural advantages. He demonstrated that their formation patterns were predictable and their response times were too slow for someone who understood human persistence. Hunting methodology. You are stronger than me. Danny said while his voice came from multiple speakers simultaneously. "You are faster than me and your equipment is superior to anything I possess. But I have something you were never taught to value. I have adaptability." Drexen listened and began to understand. This human had spent a year learning to survive against impossible odds. He had studied alien psychology and tactical thinking with the dedication of someone who had no other choice. Most importantly, he had learned to turn weaknesses into advantages. Your species evolved with natural armor. Danny continued, "You never needed to develop the patience that comes from being physically inferior. Humans spent millions of years as persistence hunters. We tracked prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to think 3 steps ahead because we could not overpower our targets through strength alone." The air in the control room was getting thin, and squad members were showing signs of oxygen deprivation. Drexen made a decision that would define his career. Open the doors. "Carter." "Why should I?" Danny asked. "Because you have made your point." Drexen replied honestly. "You have defeated Talon's squad without killing anyone, and that is a greater demonstration of skill than violence would have been." The doors hissed open, and fresh air flooded the control room. Danny appeared on a catwalk above them with no weapon in his hands. The squad raised their weapons, but Drexen ordered them to stand down. "I have a message for Captain Zrel," Danny said while looking directly at the Krenth warrior. "Tell him that I am coming for justice, not revenge. Tell him that everything he tried to hide will be exposed. And tell him that the expendable human remembers." Before Drexen could respond, Danny vanished into the station's ventilation system. Squad searched for 3 hours, but found no trace of their target when they returned to their ship. Drexen filed a report that shocked Coalition Command. He stated that Danny Carter was the most skilled tactical operator he had ever encountered. He recommended that the Council authorize negotiations rather than continued pursuit. Admiral Vrix read the report with her telepathic abilities fully engaged and sensed no deception from Drexange. Called Lisa Brennan to her office and asked about the human diplomat's investigation. Lisa presented everything she had discovered, including testimony from crew members who witnessed Danny's abandonment. The Admiral studied the evidence carefully and reached a decision. "I am authorizing a formal meeting between Carter and the Council," Vrix announced. "Prepare a message guaranteeing his safe passage." Lisa worked through the night to craft a message that would convince Danny to trust the Coalition again. She transmitted it on all frequencies and waited. Danny received the message. Aboard a small shuttle he had acquired through methods that remain mysterious, he considered the offer carefully. For a year, he had been working toward this moment. The chance to expose the corruption and force the Coalition to acknowledge their failures, but accepting the invitation meant trusting the same organization that had abandoned him. He thought about the ruins on Kethra 9 and the ancient civilization that had destroyed itself through arrogance. The Coalition was following the same path. Someone needed to stop it before history repeated itself. Danny transmitted a single word in response. "Agreed." The meeting was set for Concordia Station in 3 weeks, but Captain Zrel was already making plans of his own. He gathered loyal crew members from the Valiant Dawn and convinced them that Danny Carter represented a threat to Coalition security. "If he testifies before the Council, he will destroy everything we have built," Zrel told his conspirators. "We must eliminate him before he reaches Concordia." The crew members agreed and began preparing for what they believed would be a justified assassination. They did not realize they were proving Danny's point about the Coalition's corruption. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the Coalition could evolve beyond its prejudices or would continue down the path of the ancient civilization that had fallen 10,000 years before. Concordia Station floated at the center of Coalition space like a massive flower of metal and light. The diplomatic hub housed representatives from all 12 member species and served as neutral ground for negotiations that shaped galactic policy. Danny's arrival generated more attention than any diplomatic event in recent memory. Thousands of delegates gathered to witness the human who had embarrassed coalition security forces and exposed corruption throughout the sector. He walked through the main concourse alone, while crowds parted before him. Alien eyes watched his every move with mixtures of curiosity, fear, and respect. Danny wore simple clothes rather than any official uniform, because he no longer represented the coalition that had abandoned him. He represented something more fundamental, the principle that all lives have value regardless of species or strength. Lisa Brennan met him at the entrance to the council chamber. She had worked tirelessly to ensure this meeting happened, and her face showed the strain of weeks spent fighting coalition bureaucracy. They tried to cancel the meeting 3 times, she told Danny while walking beside him through security checkpoints. Captain Zrel has allies in high places who want this buried. I know, Danny replied calmly. I have been monitoring communications since I accepted the invitation. Ben, you know about the assassination plan, Lisa said quietly. Danny nodded, and his expression remained neutral. Zrel will make his move during the testimony, when security protocols prevent immediate intervention. How can you be so calm? Lisa asked with genuine concern. Because I have been planning for this moment for over a year, Danny answered. Everything that happens today will prove exactly what I have been saying about the coalition. The council chamber was circular, with seating arranged in tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling. Admiral Vrix presided from the highest tier, while representatives from all 12 species occupied designated sections. Danny entered the chamber and walked to the central platform where witnesses provided testimony. The room fell silent as he took his position. Captain Zrel sat in the Krenth section, with several crew members from the Valiant Dawn positioned strategically around the chamber. Danny noticed their locations and recognized the pattern of a coordinated strike. Admiral Vrix opened the proceedings with formal announcements about the purpose of the hearing. She acknowledged that serious allegations had been made regarding coalition conduct, and that testimony would be heard from all relevant parties. Technician Danny Carter, you have been granted this platform to present evidence, Vrix stated, while her telepathic presence filled the chamber with a sense of official authority. The council will hear your testimony. Danny activated a holographic display and began presenting the evidence he had gathered. Financial records showed unauthorized mining operations that destroyed ecosystems across 4 planets. Communication logs proved that Captain Zrel had sold coalition military equipment to criminal organizations' personnel. Files demonstrated a pattern of discrimination against human crew members throughout the fleet. Most damning were the recordings from the Valiant Dawn during the incident on Kethra 9. The council heard Zrel's voice clearly stating that Danny was expendable and ordering the shuttle to abandon him. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others expressed outrage through species-specific gesture. Ashrel stood from his seat, and his massive frame radiated anger. These recordings are fabricated, he shouted while pointing at Danny. This human has become unstable after his traumatic experience. The recordings are verified through 3 independent analysis programs. Lisa interjected while submitting technical reports to the council. They have not been altered. Zrel's face darkened with rage, and he made a subtle hand gesture to his confederates. They moved simultaneously with weapons that had been smuggled past security through methods that suggested inside help. Danny saw him coming and moved with the fluid precision that had become second nature during his time on Kethra 9. The first attacker was a Krenth soldier who charged with the confidence of superior strength. Danny sidestepped the charge and used the alien's momentum against him. The soldier crashed into a support pillar and collapsed unconscious. 2 more attackers approached from different angles, but Danny had already anticipated their movements. He dropped low and swept the legs from under one while deflecting the other's weapon strike with a move that turned the attacker's own force back. Against him, Captain Zrel himself entered the fight with a roar that echoed through the chamber security. Forces were trying to respond, but the speed of events had caught them on Prepared's swung with enough force to crush bone, but Danny was not where the captain expected him to be. Human moved with economy of motion, while Zrel burned energy with powerful, but inefficient attacks. This was the fundamental difference between species that evolved as apex predators and species that became apex predators. Through determination, Danny let Zrel exhaust himself while avoiding strikes and redirecting force. Krent's captain began to slow, and his breathing became labored. Danny saw his opening and acted. He struck specific points on Zrel's armor, where the plates met and where nervous systems were vulnerable in Krent's physiology. The captain fell to his knees and then collapsed forward. Security forces finally arrived and secured all the attackers. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 3 minutes. Admiral Rix descended from her position and stood before Danny. "You could have killed them," she observed. "I did not come here to kill anyone," Danny replied while meeting her gaze. "I came here to prove that the coalition has forgotten what it means to value all members equally." "You have proven much more than that," Rick said while her telepathic abilities projected respect. "You have proven that humans possess strengths the coalition has failed to recognize." Danny activated his display again and showed the final piece of evidence. Images from the ruins on Kethra 9 filled the holographic projectors. This civilization fell 10,000 years ago, Danny explained while the council watched in silence. They fell because they decided some members were expendable. They believed strength was the only measure of value. They learned too late that a society which discards its weakest members eventually destroys itself. The chamber remained silent as representatives processed the implications. Admiral Rix called for an immediate vote on comprehensive reforms. The measure passed with support from 8 of 12 species. New oversight committees would be established with Lisa Brennan appointed to leadership. Discrimination based on physical capabilities would carry severe penalties. Most importantly, humans would receive full representation in coalition decision-making. Captain Zrel and his co-conspirators were arrested and faced charges that would end their careers. Danny was offered multiple positions within the reformed coalition structure. He declined them all with polite but firm refusal. "I am returning to Kethra 9, he announced. "I am establishing a training facility where any coalition member can learn what it truly means to survive, not through strength or technology, but through adaptability and persistence." The Persistence Academy opened 6 months later, with Danny as its founder and primary instructor. Jake Morrison was the first human student to arrive. He had heard about Danny's story and traveled across coalition space to learn from the legend. Other students followed from every member species. They came to learn tactics that no military academy taught. They came to understand that true strength comes from refusing to accept defeat. Danny stood at the academy entrance on the day of the opening ceremony. The sun set over the purple forests of Kethra 9. While Ravagers kept their distance from the facility, they recognized something in Danny and his students that commanded respect. Lisa arrived with a delegation from the council to formally recognize the academy's importance. "You changed the entire coalition," she told Danny while they watched students practice tracking exercises. "I just reminded them of something they should have never forgotten." Danny replied, "Everyone has value and everyone can contribute if given the chance." Jake approached with a question about persistence hunting methodology. Danny smiled and began explaining techniques that humans had used for millions of years. The lesson was simple but profound. Never give up. Always adapt. And remember that the strongest predator is not the one with the biggest claws, but the one who refuses to stop pursuing their goal. The lone human who was overlooked had become the ultimate hunter, not through revenge, but through proving that humanity's greatest strength had always been the refusal to accept limitations, and in doing so, He had changed the galaxy's understanding of what it means to be truly strong.